Pokemon Legends Arceus is a game that came out almost a year ago now. This game is all about completing the first pokedex of Hisui. In order to do that, you need to do tasks for each Pokemon to earn points, get a higher research rank and unlock more areas and items. Those tasks include catching Pokemon, feeding and battling them. There are 242 Pokemon in this game, 238 if you don't include Manaphy, Phione, Shaman or Darkrai, which you can get with a Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, or a Sword and Shield save file on your Switch. These 238 Pokemon each have a ton of tasks, and after doing the main story I wondered how long it would take me to complete every single one of these tasks. A small side note, I don't own Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl or Sword and Shield, so I only did the first 238 Pokemon. I will put some timestamps in the description and there's a data spreadsheet I made for fun down there too. If you like this type of content, please let me know in the comments what I should do next. My name is Toynomatic and this is how I completed all of the Hisui Pokedex. With about 80 hours on the clock for beating the main story of the game, we start off this journey by entering the first area, the Obsidian Fieldlands. Here we begin with the well-known 8-gem slave Bidoof. Bidoof's tasks involve catching it 25 times, defeating it 15 times, evolving it once and doing a side quest related to this Pokemon. I caught the Bidoof, defeated some and evolved one into a Bibarel. For the side quest I had to look for 3 Bidoofs spreading mischief in the village, even though they are, I guess, standing still. Next up is Bibarel. Here there are 3 new kinds of tasks. Catching an Alpha Bibarel and seeing it use certain moves and using those moves in certain styles. Alpha Pokemon are big Pokemon with red eyes that you can find on the map. They are very aggressive and much higher level compared to the other Pokemon nearby. There is one Alpha Bibarel spawn location, so it took me a while to catch them. Then comes the moves. I need to see it use both Bite and Aqua Tail 25 times in battle, which is easy enough, but it also had to use a Strong Style move 25 times. Strong Style is one of 2 styles, the other being Agile Style. Strong Style makes your move's base power and accuracy go up, but it makes it so your next turn is later in battle. Agile Style makes you go back to back with moves faster, but it reduces your move's base power, but the accuracy doesn't change. Using a move in one of these styles is optional and it will take 2 PP of your move instead of 1. Anyway, Bibarel is very easy to finish and we are now only 1 hour further. This shouldn't take too long, right? Unfortunately, that's wrong. Next up were Starly and Staravia. Both were easy since they spawn very regularly in the Obsidian Fieldlands. Then came Staraptor and here we add a new task to the list of existing tasks. Staraptor is a flying type and as you might have guessed, flying types fly. Here comes a new task, catch Pokemon while it is flying. The problem is, this does not count as flying apparently. What does count is a Pokemon that keeps flying in a pattern like this Staraptor here. In order to catch it you need to have a good timing while throwing feather balls. I didn't know this at first, so I skipped Staraptor until I found out about it and I completed it later. I decided to finish Shinx's evolution line as it was really easy and quick, but then I got kind of tired of the Obsidian Fieldlands already. At this point only 7 Pokemon are completed and we are only 85 hours in. I left the Obsidian Fieldlands and continued to the Crimson Mirelands. Here I started with the Bidoof evolution line and yet another new kind of task appears. Catching Pokemon during a certain time of day. I had to catch 20 Bidoof at daytime. You can check what time of day it is in the top right corner of the map. I also had to feed some Bidoof. There's 5 different kinds of food in the game. Springy Mushroom, Dazzling Honeys, Hardy Grains, Plump Beans and Crunchy Salts. To see what food a Pokemon likes you need to open the Pokedex and look at the information that's added when you have caught that certain Pokemon once. Then throw the specific food near it and the Pokemon will go get it and eat it. Something annoying about Bidoof is that it is a friendship evolution and I had to evolve it 3 times. So it took me almost 3 whole hours to make that happen. Fortunately, evolving a Pokemon, in this case Bidoof, counts towards the goal of catching Roselia for some reason. So that saves some time. Roserade has another new task, is stunning it with items. There are a couple of throwable items that if you throw them enough it will stun an angry Pokemon and make you able to run away or catch it. These items are Spoiled Apricorns, Mud Balls and Sticky Globs. Then comes Carnivine, which has a different kind of task that I will come back to later. I also finished Petalil but not Lilligant because I didn't feel like finishing Lilligant at that time, I guess. I realized both the Psyduck line and the Croagunk line spawn very regularly in this area, and so I went to continue with those. But both Golduck and Toxicroak are pretty rare in the Crimson Mirelands, so I had to move again and make my way to the Cobalt Coastlands. This is where I found out about the Flying Staraptor task, and so I finished Staraptor while finishing both Golduck and Toxicroak. As you might have noticed, I have been tackling one Pokemon or one evolution line at a time, but I realized this was taking way too long. So I remembered I could defeat Golduck with Roseric's Energy Ball to save some time on both Pokemon. Then I went back to the Crimson Mirelands to finish the Ghastly line and the Kricketot line. Paris line was next, and with that I had completed 27 Pokemon and we were 110 hours in. As a break from completing the Pokedex, I went out of my way to get some of the post-game legendaries that I didn't get yet. Those being the Lake Trio, Giratina and the Forces of Nature, also Regigigas, Cresselia and Heatran. The only thing I need to do for the legendaries is catching it once and then seeing it use some moves. The problem with the legendaries is that you need to use a lot of moves in both Agile and Strong Style. Most moves had 5 PP, which means after using a move 3 times its PP would be gone and I have to heal again. The worst out of all legendary Pokemon in my opinion is Azelf. The reason why is because you need to use Self-Destruct 40 times. Not only is this a 5 PP move, it also makes you lose 80% of your max HP after using it, which doesn't make sense. To speed up this progress, I found myself a route back in the Obsidian Fieldlands that I used for almost every Pokemon after this moment. On this route I would be able to battle 20 to 30 Pokemon including Starly, Geodude, Weasel, Floatzel, Ponyta and Rapidash. So when I was making sure to complete the legendaries, I also took care of both the Ponyta and Weasel line. At this moment I am about 140 hours in and I have only completed 42 Pokemon. Oh, by the way, chasing and catching the Forces of Nature was a pain, and probably took me even longer than completing half of the legendaries in total. But on the other side I got to finish these Pokemon in the process. I went to visit every single location to collect all the purple little orbs, which I did while using a guide. I needed to collect a bunch of them to obtain Spiritomb, which was kind of fun to do but also terrifying, because the little girl who gave me the side quest actually was Spiritomb waiting to be released from the stone. Apart from that, Spiritomb was only needed to battle some other Pokemon and nothing else. Another easy Pokemon was Unknown. Unknown is known for it having 28 forms. The only thing I had to do for Unknown is catch all 28 forms hidden throughout the game. I also used the guide for this one while collecting Spiritomb's orbs, so these two took me about 3 hours total. I continued my journey into the snowy Alabaster Icelands. This area has a ton of, you guessed it, ice types. Here we have the Snorunt line, Snover line and the Swinub line to take care of for now. Swinub's line is found very regularly here and was no problem at all. Snorunt and Glalie are easy to find, while Snover and Abomasnow were a pretty rare find. The major problem here was Frostlass. Frostlass has 2 spawn locations and it only spawns at night. Not only that, but Frostlass is such a rare encounter that you could say it is almost never found as Frostlass. The other place has 1 guaranteed Frostlass, but it's an alpha Frostlass, so it was pretty difficult to catch or defeat with my Pokemon's levels at that time. So Frostlass took me a really long time compared to the other Pokemon so far. After making sure I can forget about almost all the ice types, I left the Alabaster Islands and I dove right back into the swamp. Here I completed some Pokemon like Licky and Lickitung. Lickitung took me quite a while because I had to catch a Pokemon while sleeping. Sounds easy, right? Well, in reality it's far from easy. Using moves like Hypnosis now only makes a Pokemon drowsy as if it can be paralyzed. What the task really wants you to do is wait or hide near that Pokemon until it falls asleep in the overworld. The best moment to do this is by looking for them around sunset, but the chance they will fall asleep is so small that it takes really long. And I think I have waited almost an hour for one to fall asleep. I went to finish Glaceon, Skuntank, Scyther, Scizor and the Cyndaquil line here. I was able to complete the Cyndaquil line despite picking Oshawott as my starter. In every main series Pokemon game you can choose between 3 starters. In this game those starters are Rowlet, Cyndaquil and Oshawott. I chose Oshawott and after the end of the main story I got 1 Rowlet and 1 Cyndaquil from Professor Laventon. But that's far from enough to complete the starters since you actually need to catch 5 of each starter. Then you may wonder, how do you get those starters? In Legends Arceus you have these events called Space-Time Distortions. Here you can obtain Pokemon from different regions that you're not able to get in the overworld like Magnemite, Porygon or the starters. These so-called distortions have an in-game timer where if you spend time walking around in the overworld, there is a possibility of one happening every 5 minutes. After 40 minutes of waiting, one will happen guaranteed if you haven't seen one before that time. Unfortunately, battling a Pokemon or opening the bag, map or Pokedex either pauses or resets the timer. So it took me a while to wait for these events in order to finish the Cyndaquil line. Anyway, I continued my journey in the Crimson Mirelands and here I went to finish all of these Pokemon. Now, Bonsly is another one of these Pokemon that have something special to them. Some Pokemon like Bonsly, Graveler and Bergmite need to be seen jumping out of a deposit ore a bunch of times. To see whether there is a Pokemon in one of these ores or not, you simply walk up to them, and if they shake, there is a Pokemon to be found there. The chance of this happening is pretty low for Bonsly, and there are only 4 ores in the entire game that can have a Bonsly in it. The best way to look for it is by checking the ores it can be in and re-entering the area by traveling to the village and then going back over and over again until you find all you need. This on its own took me about 3 hours. The ores for Bonsly are found in the Coronet Highlands. This is where I managed to find the Alpha Golem location and finish Golem while looking for Bonsly in ores. After that I stayed in the Coronet Highlands for a little longer and completed Hisui, Voltorb and Electrode. Rotom is found in the Coronet Highlands around the same area as Voltorb. You might not think, but Rotom is a really expensive Pokemon to finish. In order to complete Rotom you need all 6 of its forms. The way you can get these forms is by going to this guy from the Ginkgo Guild, and he will sell you 5 types of furniture. Each costs around 60 or 80,000 Pokedollars. Once bought, he will place them in your home and you can let Rotom investigate it to change its form. It didn't take me long to finish Rotom, but it did almost cost me 400,000 Pokedollars. After Rotom I finished 3 more Pokemon, Ambipom, Tangela and Tangrowth. I have officially been busy with this for a whole month and I have completed 88 Pokemon so far. We're done with a little over a third of the Pokedex, and I decided to take a break for a month and a half because I actually do have a life sometimes. Once my break was over, I started with Magikarp and Gyarados. Gyarados might not be that special of a Pokemon, but Magikarp certainly was something. Apart from all the normal tasks, I had to see Magikarp use the move Splash 100 times. Splash is a 40 PP move, so I just went up to battle another Magikarp and see them splashing around. I myself used the move 100 times only to remember the move that the opposing Pokemon uses counts too. So I have seen Splash being used almost 200 times in total. While taking care of Magikarp I kept checking the Alpha Probopass spawn to finish Probopass, and in the meantime I got lucky with some Chatot Mass Outbreak and finished Chatot. A Mass Outbreak is an event where one Pokemon species spawns in a big group for a limited amount of time. So if I ever saw one, I knew I had to rush to it, because if it wasn't completed yet I had a lot of time to save there. I figured it would be a lot smarter to finish all the Pokemon left in order as they are in the Pokedex. So we start off at the very beginning with Rowlet this time. It took me only 1 day to complete this evolution line despite needing those space-time distortions I mentioned before. And I kinda already cheated on my plan since I skipped the Oshawott line because I didn't want to wait for the distortions again. But the Wurmple line was next. Wurmple, Dustox and Beautifly weren't that big of a deal, but both Silcoon and Cascoon were. These two are a very rare find, and Cascoon only spawns during the night. After maybe hours of struggling to find them, I got lucky enough with 2 Silcoon outbreaks and 1 Cascoon outbreak, and so I finished the 2. After the bug types, the evolutions were next. These are the most difficult. I just need to catch 5 of each and then use a bunch of moves. The evolutions can only be caught in the well-known space-time distortions, but fortunately evolving an Eevee into a Vaporeon counts as catching a Vaporeon. So I just caught 37 Eevee and evolved them with their stones and friendship. One of the tasks for Zubat is to catch it 20 times during the day. The only way to do this is by getting it in a mass outbreak during the day, or so I thought. Apparently Zubat can spawn during the day in a location called Wayward Cave. The chance is still pretty small, so it took me a while before I caught all the 20 I needed. Then came the Oshawott line in Driftbloom and Driftblim, which I did back in the Alabaster Islands because they spawn more frequently there. A week-long break later and I finally continued, sort of. I finished Burmy, Wormadam and Mothim pretty quickly, and for some reason I took another week-long break, but I swear I'm going to make progress now. Munchlax was nothing special besides the fact that I had to throw a lot of food at it, and Snorlax is again a different story. Snorlax not only had to be fed 50 times, but I also had to catch one while it was sleeping. It might sound like something where I just have to wait for it to fall asleep, but that's wrong. Snorlax has only 2 locations where it can spawn, since it cannot fall asleep in space-time distortions. Location 1 is in the Obsidian Fieldlands, but it's an Alpha Snorlax which is even less likely to fall asleep. Location 2 is at the Hot Spring in the Alabaster Islands. The problem with that is that it has an insanely low spawn rate. I went for the Alabaster Islands as I did not want to wait for a sleeping Alpha and have it able to break out very easily. I spent a long time on re-entering the icy area just to find a Snorlax spawn after 2 hours. It even fell asleep immediately, but it unfortunately broke out, so I fled from the area and went back a minute later in the hope it did not despawn. The Snorlax did not despawn luckily, and in fact it even fell asleep again once I saw it on my screen. And that was Snorlax done. The Pokedex in this game is a full list of Pokemon, but also a list with obtainable Pokemon per area. I wanted to go rush the Obsidian Fieldlands so I would never have to enter that area for the purpose of catching Pokemon. The Abra line was easy, and the same goes for the Baneri, Mr. Mime, Shallows and Happiny line. I also finished Heracross pretty quickly afterwards. Next up were a bunch of Pokemon that I was probably stuck on the longest. Cherubi, Cherim and Aipom. I had to see them leap out of trees. Just like I had to see Bonsly and Bergmite leap out of ores. It took me a really long time to find Cherim and Cherubi because they are pretty rare, but Aipom is built different. Unlike the other tree Pokemon, Aipom has only one tree it can be found in. So in order to get it, I went in and out of the Cobalt Coastlands where the one tree is located for almost a week. I thought there couldn't possibly be a Pokemon that would take me longer than Aipom. I was wrong again, but we'll get to that later. Then came Overqwil, which took me longer because you need to evolve Qwilfish 5 times by using Barb Barrage 20 times in Strong Style. But now that Overqwil has finally been accounted for, all of the Pokemon in the Obsidian Fieldlands Pokedex have been completed. A total of 140 Pokemon are done, which means we are officially past the halfway point of this game. Now that the Obsidian Fieldlands are done, we continue into the Crimson Mirelands. Here we immediately start with one of the most annoying Pokemon, Barboach. The reason why Barboach sucks so much is because it only has a few locations where you can find it, and most of the time it's Whiscash that spawn in that location instead. That on itself isn't the worst about Barboach. Barboach needs to be caught without it noticing you. But this fish sees you so quickly that it's almost insane, and not just that. Most of the time it's very foggy in the locations where it's found, so the Barboach will see you before you see them. Rolls is another thing that I had quite some trouble with. There are Pokemon that need to be caught with a light or a heavy weight, but some need to be caught small or big. I had to catch 10 small rolls, and let me say, this took me way longer than other Pokemon with this condition, since it's mostly RNG based. I caught 109 Ralts to make up for this condition, which makes Ralts the Pokemon that I have caught the most throughout the whole game. I also had to catch 10 small Kirlia, but this time I realized something convenient. Just like how evolving a Ralts counts as catching a Kirlia, evolving a small Ralts counts as catching a small Kirlia. After that came Pachirisu, which was like Aipom, but instead it had a lot more trees it could come out of, so it went a lot faster than Aipom. And with that, the 3 Pokemon were finally done. The Teddiursa, Goomy, Turtwig, Murkrow and Porygon line were quickly done back to back. The Togepi line was a little different, since the Togetic tasks were a little strange to me. I only had to defeat one Togetic for some reason. You might think that it's very easy, but it really isn't. I did some research and it turns out that there is a small group of islands in the Cobalt Coastlands Tranquility Cove where there is an insanely small chance a Togetic spawns. Only there can you battle and defeat a Togetic. Togekiss was a pushover, and with that the Crimson Mirelands were done as well. We are now at the 300 hour mark with 174 Pokemon finished. After this came the Duskull line, which wasn't that bad. The process was sped up after using them to murder their own species, and I even got a mass outbreak of Dusclops with not 1, not 2, but 3 shiny Dusclops in it. This is where the fun ended for me in the Cobalt Coastlands. I hate water types with a burning passion. The 3 pink ones were alright, but all the other types weren't fun at all. First up, the Manta race. Mantike and Mantine were by far one of the most frustrating Pokemon to complete in the entire game, alongside Barboach, Tentacruel and my favorite Pokemon, which we'll get to later. I had to catch 7 small Mantike, only 7. That's 3 less than Ralts, and I still ended up catching 77 Mantike to complete the task. Problem with Mantike is that it dives underwater sometimes, which made me swim around on Basque Legion trying to catch these annoying Pokemon in time before they run away like cowards. Mantine was the exact same as Mantike, but they had to be large instead of small, so I couldn't evolve them. I ended up catching 42 Mantine. After this all I was fuming with anger, and I couldn't wait to murder all the Mantine and Mantike I could find. I can safely say out of all Pokemon this one made me the most frustrated and mad. Next up are the jellyfish Pokemon Tentacool and Tentacruel. This is the evolution line that was close to getting me even more frustrated than Mantike and Mantine. For Tentacool I had to catch 7 lightweights, which wasn't the problem at all. What was the problem is that I had to catch them without them noticing me. They could even spot me way before I got in range of throwing Pokeballs, and sometimes they spotted me before they even spawned in. Tentacruel was even worse, because Tentacruel sometimes follows you around while you try to escape from it and retry catching it without it spotting you. Both the Tentacool line and the Mantike line were on my nerves, and I can't wait to put some shovels through jellyfishes next time I go to the beach. And then came the last water type Pokemon of the whole game. I felt so relieved, especially since both Finneon and Luminion were pretty easy to complete compared to all the other swimming water type Pokemon. The only catch to this was that I had to catch them at nighttime, but that wasn't a big deal in the slightest. To finish the Cobalt Coastlines I had to do only one more evolution line, and this line has my favorite Pokemon, Magneton. There's a slight problem once again, unfortunately. This evolution line took me over 25 hours to fight it over 4 days to complete. The reason for that is both Magnemite and Magneton can only be found in space-time distortions, and it took me a really long time to catch and defeat the necessary amount and leave the beaches for good. There's only 29 more Pokemon to go and we are on our way to the Coronet Highlands. Oh, I almost forgot. I had a major slip up that could have cost me the entire progress on this video. Ninetales had a task where I had to obtain 2 different forms. Some of these insist you catch both a male and a female form, only for me to realize the game meant Cantonian and Alolan form. There's only one way you can get an Alolan Vulpix, and that's by getting it as a reward from a side quest. This is the only Alolan Vulpix you'll receive, but the big idiot that I am released it. Once I found out about that, I was panicking so much because I couldn't think of anyone to trade it to me. But then I realized there was one other way. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the savior of this entire video was Pokemon Go. I was able to transfer my Alolan Ninetales from Pokemon Go to Pokemon Home into Legends Arceus. We start off strong with Bronzor and Bronzong, but also Nosepass. The only thing I needed to see happen was them jumping out of a deposit ore and catching some heavy Bronzor. There are again only 4 ores where they can be in consistently without it being able to be a stinky Graveler or Bonsly. Then came the Elekid and Gible line, which was really easy to do and I could finish both in 2 hours separately. Next up were Chingling and Chimecho. These were pretty easy too. The only tricky part was not getting attacked by Rhyperior or being ravaged by these nutjokes. These 5 weren't a big deal either, except that it was a little annoying to only be able to find them during nighttime. Now we are at the last 4 Pokemon of this area, the Gen 4 fossil Pokemon. These again only appear in the very annoying and well-known space-time distortions, and since they are only in the Coronet Highlands there is a chance that a Pokemon from the route line spawns in one of the 3 spawn locations they could be in. Surprisingly, I found them pretty fast and could finish them 2 days faster than I did with the Magneton line. It took me 11 days to be done with the Coronet Highlands, and there are only 5 Pokemon left before I let myself go to Arceus. 395 hours in, and the last 5 Pokemon left are Zoroark, Rufflet, Braviary, Riolu and Lucario. Believe it or not, but I actually finished all these Pokemon within 4 hours of time. I already caught enough Zoroark by evolving Zora, and I used all necessary moves with it. I just had to defeat 10 of them with Dark-type moves. A small problem is that it's an incredibly rare encounter. Until this happened. I booted up the game for the first time in 3 days and the first thing I see is a Zoroark mess outbreak. So I rushed through it, no thoughts, and that was Zoroark done within 15 minutes. And just like with Zoroark, I had already used all the moves necessary with the 4 remaining Pokemon. I caught and defeated a bunch of Rufflet to complete it, then I evolved them many times to complete Braviary. Finding Riolu and Lucario took me a bit longer, but I managed to defeat enough of them to complete it on the same day. It was getting late and I had around 403 hours on the clock, and only 1 Pokemon left, Arceus. The last day of November, a Wednesday morning, the perfect time to do this. To finish, to make an end to an incredibly long journey. I go to the Temple of Sinnoh to play my Azure Flute, and then the stairs appear, just like in the Gen 4 games. Arceus greets us and it talks to us for a little, only for it to start out a battle out of nowhere, which, if I may say so myself, was a really cool battle and I did not expect it to happen at all. Arceus says goodbye to us and suddenly we are back at the temple. When I looked into my pokedex and my boxes to check if I had really finished everything, I found Arceus in my possession. I was and still am surprised you don't really need to catch it. We go back to the village, get a speech from the professor, which was not a great speech at all. And with that, I did it. It was finally done. After almost 430 hours of playing the game, we finally make an end to this very long journey. Looking back at this, it took me way too much time, but I'm also glad I did this, because it feels pretty good to have completed something all the way. I haven't done something like this in a long time. I enjoyed doing this and making this video, and I hope you liked watching it. Let me know what you want to see me doing next time in the comments and leave a like and subscribe if you want to. And I'll see you next time.